Section 4. Letters 16 to 20. Letter the 16th. Cécile Volanges to Sophie Carnay.
Ah, my Sophie, I have a heap of news. I ought not, perhaps, to tell you, but I must talk to someone. This is stronger than I. This Chevalier d'Ancenis, I am so perturbed that I can hardly write. I do not know where to begin. Ever since I related to you the sweet evening which I passed at mamma's with him and Madame de Merteuil.
Note: the letter in which this soirée is spoken of has not been found. There seems reason to believe it is that suggested in the note of Madame de Merteuil, which is also mentioned in the preceding letter of Cécile Volanges.
I have said no more about him to you. It is because I did not want to speak of him to anybody. But I was thinking of him constantly. Since then he has grown so sad, oh, sad, sad, that it gave me pain, and when I asked him why, he answered that it was not so, but I could well see that it was. Finally, yesterday, he was even sadder than ordinarily. This did not prevent him from having the kindness to sing with me as usual, but every time that he looked at me, it gripped my heart. When we had finished singing, he went to shut up my harp in its case, and returning the key to me, begged me to play again that evening when I was alone. I had no suspicion of anything at all. I did not even want to play, but he begged me so earnestly that I told him yes. He certainly had his motive. In effect, when I had retired to my room and my waiting-maid had gone, I went to get my harp. In the strings I found a letter, simply folded, with no seal, and it was from him. Ah, if you knew all he asks of me! Since I have read his letter, I feel so much delight that I can think of nothing else. I read it 4 times straight off, and then shut it up in my desk. I knew it by heart, and when I was in bed I repeated it so often that I had no thought to sleep. As soon as I shut my eyes, I saw him there. He told me himself all that I had just read. I did not get to sleep till quite late, and as soon as I was awake, it was still quite early, I went to get his letter and read it again at my ease. I carried it to bed with me, and then I kissed it as if— Perhaps I did wrong to kiss a letter like that, but I could not check myself. At present, my dear friend, if I am very happy, I am also much embarrassed, for assuredly I ought not to reply to this letter. I know that I should not, and yet he asks me to, and if I do not reply, I am sure he will be sad again. All the same, it is very unfortunate for him. What do you advise me to do? But you can no more tell than I. I have a great desire to speak of it to Madame de Merteuil, who is so fond of me. I should indeed like to console him, but I should not like to do anything wrong. We are always recommended to cherish a kind heart, and then they forbid us to follow its inspiration, directly there is a question of a man. That is not just either. Is not a man our neighbour as much as a woman, if not more so? For, after all, has not one one's father as well as one's mother, one's brother as well as one's sister? The husband is still something extra. Nevertheless, if I were to do something which was not right, perhaps Mr. d'Ancenis himself would no longer have a good opinion of me. Oh, rather than that, I would sooner see him sad, and then, besides, I shall always have time enough. Because he wrote yesterday, I am not obliged to write to-day. I shall be sure to see Madame de Merteuil this evening, and, if I have the courage, I will tell her all. If I only do what she tells me, I shall have nothing to reproach myself with, and then, perhaps, she will tell me that I may answer him a little, so that he need not be so sad. Oh, I am in great trouble. Farewell, my dear friend. Tell me all the same what you think. Paris, 19th of August, 17.
Letter the 17th. The Chevalier d'Ancenis to Cécile Volanges.
Before succumbing, mademoiselle, to the pleasure, or shall I say, the necessity of writing to you, I commence by imploring you to hear me. I feel that, to be bold enough to declare my sentiments, I have need of indulgence. Did I but wish to justify them, it would be useless to me. What am I about to do, after all, save to show you your handiwork? And what have I to tell you that my eyes, my embarrassment, my conduct, and even my silence have not told you already? And why should you take offence at a sentiment to which you have given birth? Emanating from you, it is worthy to be offered to you. If it is ardent as my soul, it is pure as your own. Shall it be a crime to have known how to appreciate your charming face, your seductive talents, your enchanting graces, and that touching candour which adds inestimable value to qualities already so precious? No, without a doubt. But without being guilty, one may be unhappy, and that is the fate which awaits me if you refuse to accept my homage. It is the first that my heart has offered. But for you, I should have been, not happy, but tranquil. I have seen you. Repose has fled far away from me, and my happiness is insecure. Yet you are surprised at my sadness. You ask me its cause. Sometimes I have even thought to see that it affected you. Ah, speak but a word, and my felicity will be your handiwork. But before you pronounce it, remember that one word can also fill the cup of my misery. Be then the arbiter of my destiny. Through you I am to be eternally happy, or wretched. In what dearer hands can I commit an interest of such importance? I shall end as I have begun, by imploring your indulgence. I have begged you to hear me. I will dare more. I will pray you to reply to me. A refusal would lead me to think that you were offended, and my heart is a witness that my respect is equal to my love. P.S. You can make use to send a reply of the same method which I employed to bring this letter into your hands. It seems to me as convenient as it is secure. Paris, 18th of August, in 17...
Letter the 18th. Cécile Volanges to Sophie Carnet.
What, Sophie? You blame me in advance for what I am about to do. I had already enough anxiety, and here you are increasing it. Clearly, you say, I ought not to answer. You speak with great confidence, and besides, you do not know exactly how things are. You are not here to see. I am sure that, were you in my place, you would act like me. Assuredly, as a general rule, one ought not to reply, and you can see from my letter of yesterday that I did not want to either. But the thing is, I do not think anyone has ever found herself in quite my case. And still to be obliged to take my decision all unaided. Madame de Merteuil, whom I counted on seeing yesterday evening, did not come. Everything conspires against me. It is through her that I know him. It is almost always with her that I have seen him, that I have spoken to him. It is not that I have any grudge against her, but she leaves me just in the embarrassing moment. Oh, I am greatly to be pitied. Imagine, he came here yesterday just as he used to. I was so confused that I dared not look at him. He could not speak to me, because mamma was there. I quite expected that he would be grieved when he should find that I had not written to him. I did not know what face to wear. A moment later he asked me if I should like him to bring me my harp. My heart beat so quick that it was as much as I could do to answer yes. When he came back, it was even worse. I only looked at him for a second. He did not look at me, but he had such a look that one would have thought him ill. It made me very unhappy. He began to tune my harp, and afterwards, coming close to me, he said, "Ah, mademoiselle." He only said these 2 words, but it was with such an accent that I was quite overwhelmed. I struck the first chords on my harp without knowing what I was doing. Mamma asked me if we were not going to sing. He excused himself, saying that he was not feeling well, and I, who had no excuse, I had to sing. I could have wished that I had never had a voice. I chose purposely an air which I did not know, for I was quite sure that I could not sing anything, and was afraid that something would be noticed. Luckily, there came a visit, and as soon as I heard the carriage wheels I stopped and begged him to take away my harp. I was very much afraid lest he should leave at the same time, but he came back. Whilst mamma and the lady who had arrived were talking together, I wanted to look at him again for one instant. I met his eyes, and it was impossible for me to turn away my own. A moment later I saw the tears rise, and he was obliged to turn away in order not to be observed. For an instant I could no longer hold myself in. I felt that I too should weep. I went out, and at once wrote in pencil, on a scrap of paper, "Do not be so sad, I implore you. I promise to give you a reply. Surely you cannot see any harm in that." And then it was stronger than I. I put my paper in the strings of my harp, where his letter had been, and returned to the salon. I felt more calm. It seemed to me very long until the lady went away. Luckily, she had more visits to pay. She went away shortly afterwards. As soon as she was gone, I said that I wanted to have my harp again, and begged him to go and fetch it. I saw from his expression that he suspected nothing, but on his return, oh, how pleased he was! As he set down my harp in front of me, he placed himself in such a position that mamma could not see, and he took my hand, which he squeezed, but in such a way. It was only for a moment, but I could not tell you the pleasure which it gave me. However, I withdrew it, so I have nothing for which to reproach myself. And now, my dear friend, you must see that I cannot abstain from writing to him, since I have given my promise. And then I am not going to give him any more pain, for I suffer more than he does. If it were a question of doing anything wrong, I should certainly not do it. But what harm can there be in writing, especially when it is to save somebody from being unhappy? What embarrasses me is that I do not know how to write my letter. But he will surely feel that it is not my fault. And then I am certain that as long as it only comes from me, it will give him pleasure. Adieu, my dear friend. If you think that I am wrong, tell me, but I do not think so. The nearer the moment of writing to him comes, the more does my heart beat, more than you can conceive. I must do it, however, since I have promised. Adieu.
Paris, 17th of August, 17...
Letter the 19th. Cécile Volanges to the Chevalier d'Anceny.
You were so sad yesterday, monsieur, and that made me so sorry that I went so far as to promise to reply to the letter which you wrote me. I none the less feel to-day that I ought not to do this. However, as I have promised, I do not wish to break my word, and that must prove how much friendship I feel for you. Now that you know that, I hope you will not ask me to write to you again. I hope also that you will tell nobody that I have written to you, because I should be certainly blamed, and that might cause me a great deal of pain. I hope, above all, that you yourself will not form a bad opinion of me, which would grieve me more than anything. I can give you every assurance that I would not have done as much to anyone except yourself. I should be very glad if you would do me a favour in your turn, and be less sad than you were. It takes away all the pleasure that I feel in seeing you. You see, monsieur, I speak to you very sincerely. I ask nothing better than that I may always keep your friendship. But I beg of you, do not write to me again. I have the honour to be, Cécile Volanges. Paris, the 20th of August, 17...
Letter the 20th. The Marquise de Merteuil to the Vicomte de Valmont.
Ah, wretch, so you flatter me for fear that I shall make a mock of you. Come, I pardon you. You write me such a heap of nonsense that I must even forgive you the virtue in which you are kept by your présidente. I do not think my chevalier would show as much indulgence as I do. He would not be the man to approve the renewal of our contract, or to find anything amusing in your mad idea. I have laughed mightily over it, however, and was really vexed that I had to laugh over it by myself. If you had been there, I know not whither this merriment might not have led us, but I have had time for reflection, and am armed with severity. I do not say that I refuse you forever, but I postpone, and I'm right to do so. I should bring my vanity with me, and once wounded at the game, one knows not where one stops. I should be the woman to enslave you again, to make you forget your présidente, and if I, unworthy I, were to disgust you with virtue, consider the scandal. To avoid these dangers, here are my conditions. As soon as you have had your lovely bigot, as soon as you can furnish me with the proof, come to me, and I am yours. But you cannot be ignorant that, in affairs of importance, only written proofs are admitted. By this arrangement, on one part, I shall become a recompense instead of being a consolation, and that notion likes me better. On the other hand, your success will have added piquancy by being itself a means to an infidelity. Come, then, come as soon as possible, and bring me the gage of your triumph, like those valiant knights of ours, who came to lay at their ladies' feet the brilliant fruits of their victory. Seriously, I'm curious to know what a prude can write after such a moment, and what veil she casts over her language, after having discarded any from her person. It is for you to say whether I price myself too high, but I forewarn you that there is no abatement. Till then, my dear Vicomte, you will find it good that I remain faithful to my chevalier, and amuse myself by making him happy, in spite of the slight annoyance this may cause you. However, if my morals were less severe, I think you would have, at this moment, a dangerous rival, the little Volanges girl. I am bewitched by this child. It is a real passion. Unless I be deceived, she will become one of our most fashionable women. I see her little heart developing, and it is a ravishing spectacle. She already loves her Danceny with ardour, but she knows nothing about it yet. He himself, although greatly in love, has still the timidity of his age, and dares not, as yet, tell her too much about it. The two of them are united in adoring me. The little one especially has a mighty desire to confide her secret to me. A few days ago particularly, I saw her really oppressed, and should have done her a great service by assisting her a little, but I do not forget that she is a child, and I do not like to compromise myself. Danceny has spoken to me somewhat more clearly, but with him my course is resolved. I refuse to hear him. As to the little one, I am often tempted to make her my pupil. It is a service that I would fain render Gercourt. He leaves me the time, since he is to stay in Corsica until the month of October. I have a notion to make use of that time, and that we will give him a fully formed woman, instead of his innocent schoolgirl. In effect, what must be the insolent sense of security of this man, that he dares sleep in comfort, whilst the woman who has to complain of him has not yet been avenged? Believe me, if the child were here at this moment, I do not know what I would not say to her. Adieu, Vicomte. Good night, and success to you. But do, for God's sake, make progress. Bethink you that, if you do not have this woman, the others will blush for having taken you. Paris, 20th August, 17.
End of